Well, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me once again for this evening's look into the Holy Book Devotional, and I am your host, Charles Logan. Um, I'm gonna go back to a devotional that I had shared with you back in December of 23, and because it just dovetails perfectly with the devotional that I did last week, entitled "A Walk in the Garden with the Man of Woe." Uh, so thank you once again for being with me for this February 26th edition of Into the Holy Book Devotional. Now, some of you may have heard me talk about a Dr. Viktor Frankl before. Now, Dr. Frankl was a medical doctor whose specialty was psychiatry. He had a successful practice in Vienna. After the Nazis invaded Austria, Dr. Frankl found himself at the Rothschild Hospital. In fact, it was the only place available that allowed Jews to practice. It was there that the Nazis arrested he and his family, along with many other Jews, and sent them first to Theresienstadt concentration camp. It was there that his father starved to death. From there, they were sent to Auschwitz, where his mother and sister were murdered, and he was then transferred to Bergen-Belsen, where he spent 3 years in horrible, unconscionable conditions. He was the only survivor of his immediate family. The Allies liberated the camp in 1945. However, during this time in the camps, Dr. Frankl observed many hopeless fellow prisoners go through stages of discouragement, hopelessness, and despair, and finally, just plain resignation. When a prisoner got to the point that they could no longer endure, they simply gave up. And shortly after that, they died. The final resignation period, which was shared by many in the camps, he called the existential vacuum, a time of hopelessness. In 1948, Dr. Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, in which he detailed this period of hopelessness. Now, I happen to have a copy of that book with me today. It's Man's Search for Meaning, an Introduction to Logotherapy, from Death Camp to Existentialism. Now, I mention this book mainly because it was the first book that I was assigned to read when I decided to become a companion for the dying. It is an essay on the abandonment of hope. When being a companion to the dying, there's a profound desire to bring peace to the end of their earthly journey. But as Dr. Frankl observed, without hope there is no peace. Now, we live in a chaotic world today, a world of distractions, a world of war and tragedy, a world where we cannot believe everything that our government tells us. For most people, it is difficult to find that peace that is so necessary for our Christian well-being. Now, I'm reminded of that passage in 2 Thessalonians 3:16, which reads, "May the Lord himself continually grant you peace in every circumstance." The Lord be with you all. Now, even as a Christ follower, we find it difficult to focus on our faith in God when times are difficult, as they are in the world right now. We pray for peace, which we find through our hope in the future. At the same time, we are reminded that our hope, that our time here will be fraught with difficulties and disappointments. The title of the devotional this evening I call In the Labyrinth with the Prince of Peace. With the very mention of the labyrinth, what are the first things that come to your mind? Is it, what is the labyrinth? Or perhaps, what does a pagan myth have to do with Christianity anyway? I'm sure that when one thinks about labyrinths, the first thing that comes to mind is King Minos and the Minotaur. The story goes that Daedalus built a maze like the labyrinth to hold the Minotaur, a horrible carnivorous monster that fed on humans. As the myth goes, the Greeks had to send two young people every year to be sacrificed to the monster. Of course, they had to be the most handsome adolescent and most beautiful young virgin. They would be placed in the labyrinth to try to escape the monster, but inevitably, no matter how hard they tried, they would eventually fall victim to the Minotaur. The myth exploited the fact that evil will eventually triumph over good, as long as it is the whim of the gods. Men were helpless because no matter how they tried, the gods controlled their hapless humans. That is, until Theseus, who was also related to the gods, destroyed the Minotaur. So what does the word labyrinth bring to mind? But a dark, frightening maze which leads to an awful death. No hope, no redeeming qualities, no peace. Interestingly enough, the symbol or image of the labyrinth is found in a multitude of different cultures. We see it in Egyptian lore in Eastern and Central Europe. It is also found in the history of the Native American culture. There seems to be a commonality with the spiritual evolution of ancient people to create a means of realizing something that symbolized life and its journey on this earth. Something that allows one to temporarily escape the reality of hardship and connect to something beyond the physical self. To seek a peace that they believed was unattainable anywhere else. How did the concept of the labyrinth become a symbol within the Christian community? Now there is some indication that the spiritual significance of the labyrinth was incorporated into churches in the 10th century. However, the labyrinth gained recognition as a Christian symbol primarily during the Renaissance. The ancient pagan maze was reborn as a means of prayer walking and getting rid of all of those distractions that prevented a closer spiritual connection to God and Christ. Of course, it meant different things to different people, but in all circumstances, it was looked at as a way to obtain that peace that comes with a closer relationship with God. The labyrinth served as a means of allowing one to meditate, to look inward at one's spiritual self, to draw closer to that place where God was. Walking the labyrinth became a symbolic life journey with all those unexpected twists and turns, the unavoidable encounters with strangers, going forward at a time or retreating, but at all the while keeping one's focus on that goal in the middle of the labyrinth, the image of that flower, sometimes known as the Rose of Jerusalem. Now, Deuteronomy 31:8 tells us, "And the Lord is the one who goes ahead of you. He will be with you. He will not fail you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed." Today, many facilities provide comfort to the sick and dying, and on their campuses they have a labyrinth of some kind. Right here in Tucson, at the Tucson Medical Center, there's a large labyrinth on their campus that's available to all their patients and others who feel the need to take time to meditate and pray. My first introduction to the labyrinth came at a meeting during my hospice training at Tucson Medical Center. It was made known to us that the labyrinth had been put in place for those patients who were facing the end of their earthly journey, as well as patients who were experiencing a painful recovery. However, it was also available to anyone who wanted to find peace in a solitary, quiet, and reflective environment. Christians and non-Christians alike, we all need peace in our lives. As Christians, we thrive on hope in the future. We know what our ultimate destiny is and what our obligations to others are in this short journey. We go through the same disappointments and pain, as anyone else. We have no special dispensation from the hardships of life. As a matter of fact, we are to be co-heirs with Christ. We will also share in his suffering, and that's a fact. But we can take comfort in the precious reminders of Christ's sacrifice, the cross upon which he bore our sins, the elements of his last supper in which he ushered in the new covenant of grace. And even the labyrinth, the symbol of our walking with Christ along the path of life. Now here's my opportunity to share my own experience with walking a labyrinth. It was just the other day, and I did research for this, as I was doing research for this devotional. I contacted a representative from a local well-known retirement facility, knowing that they had a labyrinth on their campus. Now, it was not open to the public, so I explained my situation. I asked for special permission to walk their labyrinth. I have to admit that my approach was much too clinical. I have to admit that my research and my history of the spiritual significance of the labyrinth kind of prepared me for something that I wasn't expecting. I wanted to feel that closeness to God, but I must have over-anticipated my desire, and my expectations were too high. The labyrinth was much smaller than I had expected, and besides, I was distracted with the thought that someone would interrupt my meditation. But I began my walk at the opening. Labyrinths are, of course, unicrucial. That means they only have one path in and one path out. As I walked the circular path, I prayed, but I just couldn't feel that spiritual closeness that I had read about and I had anticipated. Yet I did get a sense of the symbolic journey through life. The unexpected turns and returns, a steady walk to a goal that I had in sight from the very beginning. There was a shady area that I walked through which reminded me of the dark times along life's journey. And finally, the goal in the center. Even though I did not have that deeply spiritual feeling that I so much wanted, I did know that there was a sense of peace that I know came from the presence of the Prince of Peace himself. You know, I take comfort in the knowledge that God in his grace and mercy has provided not only his constant companionship, but also a means to walk with his Son whenever and wherever we want. He has not only provided that dark and quiet place away from distractions to pray and to feel Christ's presence, but he has also given us places where we can reflect and meditate and connect with Christ on a level that has no comparison. He has said that he will never leave us or forsake us, no matter the circumstances or the place. So I submit to you that among the precious symbols that we are blessed to have, symbols that help us to draw closer to God, the labyrinth may, in fact, be another way to walk with the Prince of Peace himself. So in closing, I'm indebted to Dr. Frankel's research because it clearly illustrates the hope that each of us must have to attain that peace that passes all understanding. Well, thank you for joining me for this rather short devotional this evening, and Lord willing, we'll be able to get together again next Thursday at 6 o'clock for the Look into the Holy Book devotional. I am, once again, your host, Charles Logan, wishing you a very good week until, Lord willing, we can get together again. So until then, I'm Charles Logan, wishing you a great week. And may God bless each and every one. Good night.